Hello friends from Islamabad. In this vlog today, we'd like to talk about what Pakistan actually wants, what is its narrative as the Afghan Taliban rampage through their country, and that is raising alarm in their extended neighborhood. Pakistan, being one of the two critically close neighbors, is equally alarmed and concerned about what is happening next door. It is also alarmed about how the US and its allies are increasingly focusing on Pakistan for being what they believe responsible for the happenings in Afghanistan. There are some key critical messages that the Pakistani leadership is conveying right now in a very difficult and complex situation. So what is it that Pakistan wants to convey to the world? There are a few messages here. Number one is Pakistan continues to support the international peace efforts for Afghanistan under the UN Charter as a responsible member of the international organization. Number two, the US and allies who came to Afghanistan to vanquish terrorists ended up signing a peace deal with the same enemy, that is, the Taliban, should not scapegoat Pakistan for their failures in Afghanistan. Number three message is Pakistan cannot provide a face saver to a mighty coalition force that came with the most modern military hardware and which had romanced with the idea of building the Afghan nation. And didn't President George Bush tell the world that the US was in Afghanistan to build the nation as well as to kill terrorists? President Biden has now dispelled that notion of nation building. So what do you call it? A U-turn, a turnaround, a somersault? Number four message, don't blame Pakistan for your own flawed policies that have left Afghanistan as divided and beleaguered as it was before the 9/11 tragic incidents. The number five critical message on Pakistan's engagement with the Taliban is Pakistan forced the Taliban to the negotiations table in Doha. But President Joe Biden's July 8 announcement on withdrawal from Afghanistan left Pakistan with whatever little leverage it had been left with. Number six, Pakistan had categorically conveyed to the Taliban that the restoration of their Islamic Emirate that was disbanded in December 2001 was out of question, and that the only way out of the current quagmire was a negotiated settlement. Message number seven is forcing the militia on table would not have been possible had Pakistan not squeezed the Taliban militia in multiple ways. Obviously, the world doesn't know what tools did Pakistan apply to pressurize them, but very critical steps that Pakistan took in the last 4 or 5 years to really pressurize the Taliban for flexibility and for talks with their counterparts in Kabul. Another critical message, message number 8 from Pakistani leaders is, we have seen enough of war. Now don't expect us to wage yet another war on our soil. For your sake, we will not do it. We will not crack down on the Afghan Taliban, many of whom continue to live in the Afghan refugee villages on the Pakistani side of the border. They also have a lot of sympathizers within the religio-political parties. That is a socio-political reality of Pakistan. We are trying to manage that social political reality to the advantage of the rest of Pakistanis as well as the world. This is what people have to understand. The message number 9 is about the unity or disunity among the Afghan stakeholders. Pakistan says, we tried very hard, we are still trying harder to convince all the Afghan stakeholders to find a mutually accommodating, mutually comfortable future roadmap for their country. But if they can't unite on this, don't blame Pakistan. If they cannot agree on a roadmap for their country, don't dump the blame at Pakistan's doorstep. The US and our allies also tried this but failed. How can a country on its own achieve something that a mighty coalition could not after investing trillions of dollars? The next message, a very critical one on the unity or lack of it within the Afghan stakeholders, is that Pakistan is still trying harder, ever harder, to bring all the stakeholders to the negotiations table, to make them agree to a mutually accommodating, broad-based future roadmap for their country. But if they cannot unite, don't blame Pakistan. And if Afghan stakeholders cannot get together because of personal, political, or geopolitical preferences, then don't hold Pakistan responsible for that. And the third message relates to geopolitics and the contradictions that Pakistanis see from outside Pakistan, coming from the Western world as well as from the next door neighbors. The message is, Pakistan cannot accept the Western duplicity and geopolitical exceptionalism anymore. Nor is it in our interest, say the Pakistani leaders, to offer cooperation under the continued barrage of accusations and slander from across the border as well as elsewhere. Such attitude has already narrowed space for these leaders for bolder initiatives on foreign policy engagement with the US and with Afghanistan. And another important message, number 11, from the Pakistani leaders is, stop politicizing the Financial Action Task Force tools for geopolitical ends. We have made mistakes in the past, but part of the blame also goes to the US and allies for the two wars they launched in Afghanistan for their geopolitical interests. Once it was against the Soviet Union, and then it was against Al-Qaeda. And now President Joe Biden says they have defeated terrorists and now they will fight the terrorists where they are. Means they have sanitized, they have cleansed Afghanistan of terrorists. These politically motivated wars essentially subverted the very ideals and principles of democracy, rule of law, and human rights that the West has been promoting, talking about, and heavily investing in the developing countries. So it's a contradiction that on the one hand, they invest in advocacy programs which promote democratic values, but on the other, they force these countries into geopolitical adventures that basically go against the spirit of the very teachings they bring to these countries. The last important message coming from out of Pakistan is the current generation of civilian and military leadership is trying hard to extricate the country from the consequences of the blunders that their predecessors committed 30, 40 years ago. But charting a new path out of that maze requires support from within and trust from abroad. The outsiders share an equal blame for having pushed Pakistan into two wars, the impact of which, the socio-political and economic impact, had been devastating for the society. This is what most countries don't acknowledge and realize. one of the last messages is also that the tendency to call out Pakistan for every glitch that happens across the border or elsewhere should stop. Isn't it about time to acknowledge the damage the two Afghan wars did to Pakistan? Which country would like to have fire next door and hope not to be affected by it? If the fire is next door, then it engulfs the entire neighborhood as well at some stage. It's very simple logic. This is what Pakistan has been trying to convey to the rest of the world.